Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you could join us today. As Dr. Campbell said, I really wanted to just take this moment to talk about what contributing during adolescence looks like and why we should care about that and how we can support youth civic engagement and activism. And I hope you all have been kind of paying attention to the news, and maybe that's part of the reason that you're here. But some of the things that I want to be able to accomplish today in this brief webinar is discover what do we mean when we say civic engagement, right? And how is civic engagement something that's going to help young people develop really important skills that are important not just in their life right now, but also in their lives as adults, as that's what the step that they're reaching towards. And finally, I also want to talk about how parents, but just broadly adults, so teachers, other folks who work with young people, can support youth activism while staying safe, right? Because right now we are living in the middle of a pandemic, multiple pandemics, if we want to talk about it. So we want to still support young people as change makers, but I want to share some tips and tricks about how we can do that as adults in young people's lives. So let me start by just talking about contributing in general. So we all actually have this need to want to help. So even like experimental studies will show about 30% of people will give back to others or help others, regardless of knowing what the need is, what the individual's true need is. And being able to connect on this emotional level, like through empathy, can help us want to give back and want to help others, but that's not actually a requirement. And during adolescence, so this period that we're thinking about, mostly we often think about this as the teenage years, but between when kids are transitioning from childhood to becoming adults, this need to want to give back and contribute actually is heightened. And there might be many different reasons for this. One, it might be because we have developed this enhanced social cognition. So while as kids, I might want to help others because I care more about fairness. I might want to say everyone should have everything equal, right? That's the only fair thing. As adolescents, we're able to see more complexities and move beyond just simple rules to really see what sorts of situations require our helping and us to give back. But it might also be because there's more opportunities during this adolescence period. So just even think about in our own families. As kids are getting older, we might be assigning them more roles, or more chores. So we might be asking them to take care of their younger siblings or take care of the elders in the home. Might be assigning them more responsibility, which is just giving them more opportunities to take ownership, develop agency, and learn what giving back and helping behavior really looks like. But there's also this brain development that's taking place. So during adolescence, of course, through maturity, after puberty, through these brain developments, we might have actually growing desire to process and capacity to process how, when, and who we want to contribute resources to, and how we want to support these people and others. But generally, when we think about giving back or just helping others, this engagement during the adolescence years with your community, with social institutions, with just others, is really predictive of a successful transition into adulthood, which is what we're really caring about, right? But what do we mean when we think about one specific form of giving or contributing, which is civic engagement? What comes to your mind when you think about civic engagement? I want you to take a moment to just think about these questions, okay? So what comes up for you when you think about civic engagement? And also, who do you think of as civic agents of change, as agents of change? Think about that person. Who comes to mind? So whenever I've asked these questions before, a lot of times the answers I get for the first question often are things like voting, right? That might be one of the first things that comes to mind when we think about civic engagement. But right now, given everything we're experiencing as a country and looking around and seeing, one of the first things that might come up is protesting. Whereas we think about civic agents, sometimes, whenever I've asked this question before, the things that I get, the answers that I get, are usually things like politicians or adults right? Other adults, parents, community leaders. But right now, we might be thinking a lot about our young people, who we can see as these civic agents of change. So you might be wondering, well, what do we mean by civic engagement? So civic engagement really involves a lot of different types of giving. So it moves much beyond just wanting to help others. So it might be things like political behaviors, so your political involvement, like voting, writing letters to people in power. Might be things like giving back, donating, funding particular needs of people. Might be advocacy, using your voice to persuade different decisions. But I want to use this quote by an educator and activist, Diane Katz, that I think really captures what we mean by civic engagement. It's more than just voting, more than just volunteering, and more than just knowing more. It's about leaving the community better than you found it. And we might think about civic engagement as just the different positive ways that adolescents, young people specifically, are contributing to their schools, their families, their neighborhoods, and acting on this heightened sense of responsibility to one's community. And it also might be these just intentional actions that we take to participate in a democracy. So when we think about civic engagement, it can mean a lot of different things, right? Like voting, volunteering, activism, having a higher sense of critical consciousness. But it's made up of just this working to make a difference in your community is made up of different aspects. So it moves beyond just knowledge to also having skills and attitudes and eventually getting to a place where you can take action in these behaviors, like protesting, for example, or voting. So we get these from different aspects in our lives. So for young people, the knowledge of the aspect of civic engagement might be coming from taking part in government classes at school. It might be being part of school government. It might be just learning about your community, local organizations and political organizations, knowing what the government structures are like, knowing that we live in a democracy. But that's not enough. Just knowing enough isn't enough to gain skills. And a lot of these skills to be able to be part of civic society and politics and democracy can come from even participating in non-political activities, like being part of extracurricular things, like being on a basketball sports team at school, can help young people gain these skills, like knowing what it means to work together, work in a group, get everyone's opinion so that they can actually engage in collective action. So just being part of different groups can be really helpful in developing these skills that are important for civic engagement. And it eventually leads to having these attitudes. So being part of a family circle where you're expected to take care of others, you're encouraged to be part of the family unit, might give you more willingness to actually want to make these positive contributions to your society. So these different aspects can lead from a lot of different places in young people's lives that eventually leads to taking action, right? Participating in actual activities like volunteering or protesting or voting to make your community better. And why do we care about all of these things? It's because a lot of times youth under the age of 18 are legally excluded from voting, right? And often particularly excluded from other political spheres and positions of power. So understanding youth engagement really requires us to think beyond just formal ways of engaging that allow youth to tackle injustices and impact social issues that they care about, right? So we're seeing young people really wanting to speak up against police brutality right now and organizing a lot of protests, for example, but also impacting different social issues. So we've been seeing how young people have really been leading the movement against gun violence in schools or for climate change. But through these different activities, we often think about civic participation as offering many opportunities so that young people can build cognitive and socio-emotional skills and form an identity. Because remember, during adolescence, we're trying to figure out, where do I fit in? What are my beliefs? Who am I going to be as an adult? So adolescents are able to develop through participation, through civic engagement, different worldviews, attitudes, and just behavioral patterns and how they're taking action that are going to carry through into adulthood. So this way they can impact their own outcomes in adulthood. But if I'm not convincing you yet why civic engagement is really impactful and why we should support young people, let's just talk about it broadly, right? And think about our current context right now, the time of social distancing. So throughout the webinar, I'm going to include just a few books and different links that will be included in the description when this recording is posted. You can get access to those, but you can also look at these here. So regardless of what form, right, regardless of whether you're volunteering, whether you are being part of a food bank, or if you're protesting, regardless of the form, being part of civic life is actually really impactful to everyone who engages in it. So it's related to having higher self-esteem and feelings of self-worth. You might be able to make more friends and have these social contacts, and also have lower negative mental health outcomes and fewer serious illnesses. So for everyone, participating in civic engagement is important. And these are some of the things that we might be feeling right now, especially in a time of social distancing. So taking part in some sort of positive action to help your community might help get some of these back that we're lacking in a time of social distancing. But when we're thinking specifically about children and adolescents, a lot of our worries around the teenage years that we think about with our teenagers might actually be lessened if they are using their voices in this positive way through civic engagement. So youth who are more engaged are actually less likely to use and abuse drugs and alcohol, drop out of school, or suffer from depression and other social emotional problems. And also, during this time of adolescence, when I care a lot more about my peers, what my friend group thinks, whether I'm accepted, those are things that are more likely to happen to you if young people are more civically engaged. So they might be more likely to actually have higher self-esteem, have this sense of agency that I can make a difference, I can do something, relate well to other peers, but also to their parents. They might develop more empathy skills and be able to demonstrate that empathy for others, and also do better in school. And a lot of this, especially when we're thinking about at the time of social distancing, civic engagement can help young people build this social capital. So it can impact in lots of positive ways for young people, but young people might be participating in what's their immediate environment. So immediate environment a lot of times being their immediate communities, their neighborhoods, or their schools. So they might join school clubs and teams. They might get involved in student government at the school, or even become a member of a youth organization, such as a local YMCA. But young people can really gain important skills through this type of extracurricular involvement. And this helps them build the sense of connection and care more about their community. And during the current pandemic, what we know from a lot of research, what's been done, is disasters can actually strongly heighten our need to belong to community. So during a time when we're social distancing, we're not able to belong, perhaps being more engaged can actually make you feel like you are belonging to a community and build this social capital. And families can play a huge role in that. So I want to spend some time just thinking about the context of families, right? So a lot of families can play a lot of different roles. But first and foremost, if you see your family engaged in different civic activities, and again, it doesn't matter what kind, right? If you see your family engaged in civic activities, you're more likely to be engaged during the adolescent years. And parents and guardians specifically can actually facilitate even the knowledge aspect of civic engagement by providing these different models, by just discussing political and social issues in the household in a meaningful way. So growing up in a family that shows interest in civic issues, and again, I'm not talking about like political leanings, right? I'm not talking about whether this matters if this is in a liberal format or conservative format. It really is just having conversations in the house and talking about it, showing interest in civic issues. You're more likely to raise a teenager, raise adolescents who have this sense of responsibility towards their community, and then show that through taking action in their community. And this type of parental modeling of civic behaviors predicts participation in adolescence, but also can help transmit this knowledge, values, and different actions from this older generation to the younger one. So adolescents develop just a sense of responsibility to doing something to make their communities better. And I again want to talk about how this can vary in a lot of different ways. So right now, a lot of people are talking about being part of our civic environment through voting. This might be a way that parents are encouraging their young people, especially as they're turning this voting age, if they are able to, right? If they're not excluded from voting practices. But even a lot of celebrities are coming up with aspects or different goals to push young people to vote, because one of the things we've seen is voting patterns have been declining or very low compared to, for young people, compared to the youngest group of Americans compared to others. So even Michelle Obama has an initiative that she's put out called When We All Vote, that is encouraging young people to vote, right? To come out and vote and use their political voice that way. We've seen just this last week, prominent basketball player LeBron James, along with other athletes, have put out an initiative called More Than a Vote, really trying to push for us to vote and use our civic voices in that way. But even what's predictive of whether young people are voting is what they have been engaged in before they become of this critical age. So this is from survey data that was collected in the 2016 election. And as you can see, for young people, about half of them who voted, who were first-time voters, these are 18 or 19-year-olds, about half of them had taken a civics class in high school. About 40% of them used this information from their family to actually decide how to vote. 30% of them had signed a petition before. About half of them had said that their level of political engagement had increased just in the past 2 years. So they were engaged in these different ways prior to just engaging in this more formal way of voting. And again, thinking about our current context, what we might be seeing a lot more now with young people, if they don't have the possibility to do a lot of these things in a physical space, right? So by joining different communities in their environment, or by actually going out and protesting, we're seeing this uptick in online activism. So these are just some headlines that I just pulled from prominent news sources like the New York Times or LA Times, where young people are using social media to come up with these collective actions that they want to engage in. And this is actually very well supported, where young people who are more likely, they're actually more likely to volunteer offline when they're part of these online networks. And online, young people can gain a lot of different skills, even when they're working in a non-political space, that are quite relevant to working in a civic or political space. So how they can learn things like how to work in a group, or how to negotiate things, how to get organized, how to organize other people. And they're also being put into broader social networks. So many of these networks are much broader than what they might be getting in their other groups. So imagine if a young person is really involved in their church community. They might be surrounded by other people who think a lot like them. But through this type of online participation, they might actually have the opportunity to seek other young people who have different views than them. Or they are able to develop these online networks and get an opportunity to learn and hear perspectives that they wouldn't otherwise hear in their own communities. So there are a lot of benefits of young people engaging in this online space as well. So while there might be interest, and we know, like I mentioned to you, during the adolescent period, there's a heightened need and want to contribute, to give back, to do something. There are a lot of different ways that we can start, but one of the biggest things to keep in mind is we need to respect children's agencies. So if kids don't want to be politically engaged, that's okay. I think one of the things we can do is just create opportunities for them to be engaged, but not push it through just educating, helping them gain exposure, and helping them critically evaluate what those opportunities mean and what they look like. And the way to start and really encourage young people to start might be to start local. So these are all links that you can get access to. If you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, you can email us and we can get it to you. So starting local. So this might be looking up what your local government spheres look like. It might be learning more. So just researching. What are these issues that young people are leading? What do they mean? Do my values align well with them? Do I want to be involved? And if I do choose that I want to be involved, then helping them just make sure they know their rights. So especially right now, if young people want to go out and protest and be part of protesting movement to really speak up against injustices that they're seeing, that they're witnessing, might be just making sure that they know their rights of what to do in a protest or in participating in civil disobedience. And the way that they can do this also is through connecting with other young activists. And I say online here, but really even in person, but helping them connect with other young activists online and deciding what matters to them and what they can really care about. But I want us to always remember that there is this on-ramp for youth activism. So it takes time, right? Everyone has to learn how to participate in social movements. And this is where I think, again, parents and guardians and just families, but also people who work with young people, teachers, other leaders can support this type of activism. So when we think about what's at stake for young people, we know that young people understand inequality and injustices. So our role really becomes listening to young people as political actors, as civic actors. And many children and youth see injustices in the world around them, and they want to address those injustices to create a better world. And they're doing so in a lot of different variety of ways, from protest to political policy advocacy, to educating themselves and their peers on social media, for example. And I think as adults in their lives, as parents, guardians, teachers, and other adults with relationships with young activists, we can help or hinder their efforts. So here are just some tips about how we can support their leadership and their work. It starts with questioning our own assumptions. So what did we think we knew that we don't? We actually want to be able to learn from them, learn from young people, and amplify their voices. And the way that we can do this is by offering resources, right? Really broadcasting our willingness to be helpers. Maybe it's that we can connect them with different parent groups in the area, or maybe we can connect them with different resources, funding resources that might be helpful for them. And we can also help provide institutional memory and continuity, because we've been here longer, right? So maybe as part of this community, you remember something that had happened that really encouraged you or encouraged other people to speak up. And that might be important knowledge for young people trying to organize right now around an issue that they care about. And you can offer also supportive labor. And really, when you say your voice matters, mean it. So by offering supportive labor, maybe you can start just an awareness building campaign on a topic that they're interested in. Maybe you can hold an event at a club or a school or a community organization that you're part of and use that to help young people connect with one another and to help them just connect with and offer space and resources that they might not have otherwise access to. And really being also, I think one of the places that we can be impactful in supporting young people is by being realistic about consequences. So really helping them understand what it means if they go out there and do protest. So it starts from knowing your rights, but also being realistic about what other consequences they need to be dealing with. Meanwhile, also letting them know that their voice matters and we really care about it. So there's lots of different ways that we can support young people in their activism, in their civic engagement, especially as they're trying to figure out who they are during this age that they really do want to give back. And that is really helpful for them in so many different ways. So I want to leave us with just some concluding thoughts. So our children and youth are not simply future adults, right? They're fully realized people with observations and opinions about the world they live in and aspirations about the ones that they want to bring into being. So on issues from climate change to living with HIV to police brutality, young people and children in some cases are actually leading the way. So one of the things we need to keep in mind is we need to start conceptualizing political and civic participation much more broadly, and not only focusing on formal processes like voting, which is really important, but might not be accessible to all youth. So we also need to focus on informal aspects of civic engagement, whether that's someone just wanting to learn more or using social media or joining an Instagram Live campaign to learn more, but also remembering that there is this developmental need. This is the time when young people are trying to figure out who they are. And during this time, their engagement is going to predict what their engagement looks like as adults. So really viewing young people as active agents in their construction of civic engagement and what they care about in their everyday lives, but also in different contexts. So including the home, the school, the neighborhood, media, and even social media and other communication technologies. Just remembering that what we can do is ourselves get involved, but also encourage our young people to become socially, politically, and civically engaged. These are just some organizations that are currently led by young people in the Los Angeles area that are leading different campaigns. This is a link, again, that we'll have access to in the recorded webinar when it's posted, to if young people are really getting interested about what's happening right now around the Black Lives Matter movement in different ways that they can get involved all in one place, because I know that's what we're seeing a lot of different places right now. And then this is a link that's getting at some organizations that might help young people get a starting place. Local organizations, like I said, like Start Local in the San Bernardino area, that we can connect young people with so that they can become and stay civically engaged. So I'm going to end that there and just say thank you very much for joining us. And I know there might be some questions. So I'm going to ask Dr. Campbell if there are any questions that
Yes.
you all have posed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Brar. That was awesome. So yes, please do put your questions into the chat if you have any, and I'll be sure to get them answered. So we have one so far. Do you have a recommendation for how to raise the importance of social activism in our own children? How should children get involved? Is there such a thing as too young?
That's a great question. So I think when we think about, is there such a way as too young? I want to bring us back to what I said initially, that civic engagement means and social activism means a lot of different things, right? So it starts with not just the action piece of being out there and getting involved. It also includes knowledge. And going back to what I said about with parents, I think and in our own families, one of the things we can do is bring political and social and conversations around social issues into our household. So even very young, so when we think about things like racial injustice, kids at a very, very young age recognize and notice race and notice racial differences. So they are already noticing these things. So what we can do as the immediate people that are around young people is to at least have conversations and articulate our beliefs on what these different issues are. So around racial injustice, if that's what we know that they're noticing it, we know that they're seeing it, especially as we're seeing a lot more screen usage by young people, right? Very young folks know how to use different, so even social media than, even I would know. So we know that they're noticing it. So by just having conversations and providing them with that knowledge, and of course, a developmentally appropriate way, is helping them build into this place where they can get to a place where they want to actually take action. And I think the other big piece was by parents modeling that behavior. So whether it's if you yourself are not able to go out and protest, doing more than just once a year. Of course, we know around holiday times, we see a lot more people going to the food banks. We see a lot more people doing things like volunteering with their kids. And kids notice that. So maybe doing that more than just around holiday times and volunteering in your community and taking your kids along with you and modeling that is going to help them also get to a place where they will realize and want to take action. And then, of course, if they decide that there's an issue that they really care about, they want to speak up on, offering them those resources, offering them more knowledge, doing the research for them, connecting with other young people are different ways that we can encourage them and support them in using their voices around social issues that they care about.
Great, thank you.
In my opinion, there isn't too young to start with. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Another person says, thank you so much for this talk. I have an 18-year-old. What recommendations would you give for participating in activism, specifically protesting during the pandemic? As a parent, these feel like competing developmental issues.
Mm-hmm. So protesting, and I'm trying to understand by competing developmental issues. So I think at this point, the recommendations that I would give is first just having encouraging conversations with your 18-year-old around why they want to protest, right? What is it that they want to go out and protest, use protest as a form of their engagement, instead of a lot of other different things, right? Because a lot of times there's some research that's been done. So there's this book called #Activism that's talking about, well, social media is really taking precedence, and that's where we're seeing a lot of young people engage in their activism, is through online spaces and social media. So when a young person wants to actually protest, trying to understand what's behind that. Why do they want to engage in protesting? And then second, I think the advice that I would give is encouraging them and also sharing with them their rights around protesting, making sure would they understand what it means to be safe in a protesting environment. So something that you can look up is ACLU has knowing your rights around protesting, and really helping them understand what that means. So even things from safety, like turning off, if they have a cell phone, like, putting it on airplane mode, or turning off facial recognition while in a protesting mode, or all the way to like wearing a mask, being outside and wearing a mask, carrying hydration, and then also knowing what to do when there is police involved in that protesting. And always also encouraging them to not do that alone, right? So are there other young people, are there friends really involved and want to also protest? Is there an organization that they can be a part of? So a lot of times we're also seeing different youth organizations, like a couple of the ones that I mentioned, but also just schools. Different people from different school communities are organizing different events. So can they be with someone else, with another young activist, when they are going out and protesting? So I think it's really important for us to encourage them to learn more, but also learn more ourselves so that we can share these tips with them. I know growing up personally, like I was very involved, and I saw my dad being very involved and my grandfather being very involved, and that's how I became involved. But when it came to some controversial issues, the first thing I got from my dad was, don't go out there. Don't go out there. And as a teenager, I wanted to do more of what my parents told me not to do. So I was like, what do you mean? I really want to do this. So I think what's more helpful is helping understand and learning from them why they want to do that, why they want to go out and protest, and then helping them learn their rights and knowing that they have the resources when they are out there protesting. And then debriefing with them afterwards as well and learning from them.
Our participant clarified a little bit that she was trying to ask about the safety from the virus itself. So her daughter wants to get out and protest, but then she also wants her to be involved, but she wants to keep her safe. And so, yeah. So you touched upon some of those things too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then I have another question here. How do I encourage my children to form their own sense of social activism without just imposing my own beliefs? I want them to share my values, but I also want them to develop these on their own.
That's a great question. So I think modeling obviously is really helping them just even get a sense of that this is important, and developing that sense of social responsibility, just a sense of responsibility to their communities. But the one way that we can encourage them to develop, like keep with their own values, but also develop their own interests, is by, again, that exposure and exposing them to different types of things. So right now, actually, I'm very, very impressed by how many I didn't understand, and I'm not personally on TikTok, which is a social media mechanism, but a lot of young people are using that to talk to other young people about different issues that matter to them. So this might be around issues like gun violence in schools, might be like issues around climate change, but even issues around like how to be anti-racist right now, what we're seeing in our like public knowledge and rhetoric right now. So just encouraging and connecting with different resources so that your child can also see other young people who are modeling different types of activism and different types of things that they're involved in. And then the other thing is, one of the things I mentioned is just developing those skills can come from non-political and non-civic related activities as well. So maybe your child is more interested in being part of a different club at school or being part of a sports team. And that's okay, as long as you keep modeling and you keep encouraging them and you keep showing them and having conversations around social issues they're still learning really important skills that are important for taking collective action through these other type of apolitical, we might consider them apolitical activities. And as you keep encouraging them, you will see that they might become much more interested over time. Just remembering that there is this on-ramp, that it takes time for people to figure out what is most meaningful to them. And I've seen a young person being very quiet as part of a youth organizing group around homelessness. This is anecdotal evidence just supporting that for the entirety of the program, for the entirety of a 10-week program. And then at the end of 10 weeks say, I want to lead an effort to get solo chargers for youth who are living out on the streets, because I realize that now in a pandemic, they can't do that. So even if they're quiet, not just assuming that they're not actually learning and taking things in, it might take time for them to get to a place where they want to engage in a lot of different ways.
Great. Okay, well, those are the questions that I see. So I want to take the time to thank you, Dr. Brar, for joining us and talking to us about this important topic, so timely, so relevant right now. And so glad this will be available to people afterwards on our YouTube channel. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for participating in this webinar, hosted by the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at California State University, San Bernardino, providing guidance for parents and families based on science and best practice since 2002.